Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans. And guys, we have a very special guest on. He is the founder and CEO of C-Suite with Jeffrey Hayzlett. That's our next guest. He's executive perspective on C-Suite TV and business podcast host of all businesses and on C-Suite Radio. He's global business celebrity, speaker, best-selling author, and chairman of C-Suite Network, home of the world's most trusted network of C-Suite leaders, which we're going to be diving into in his amazing ecosystem he's built. He's a well-traveled public speaker, former Fortune 100 CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and author of 4 best-selling business books, The Hero Factor, Think Big, Act Bigger, The Rewards of Being Relentless, Running the Gauntlet, and The Mirror Test. He's also been featured alongside the Celebrity Apprentice with Donald Trump for 3 seasons. Please welcome my next guest, the one and only Jeffrey Hayzlett. How you doing today, Jeff?
Hey, thank you, brother. I'm doing great. Ready to fly out and get to another city. I'm going to be doing a bunch of different cities next couple of days, but I'm glad to take the time so we could visit.
Well, Jeffrey, I really appreciate you taking the time as well. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of start off a little bit is, obviously right now we're headed into, a recession. But at the end of the day, no matter what we are headed into economy at a macro level, there's always going to be boom and bust cycles. And what I found so interesting, Jeffrey, is you've been in this industry for many, many years. So you've seen the booms and busts. And so this is nothing new to you. And you've obviously created some really cool content recently in regards to how to navigate as a C-suite level, how to navigate the recession on a corporate structure, but also on a mindset level. And I'd love to just kind of start with that as a foundation and then go from there. What are you telling your audience and your ecosystem right now?
Yeah, I'm laughing or smiling because I think you just told everybody I'm old. I think that's what you just said. I think. That I've seen all these things. Well, during the darkest times, you think back to the last recession that we had. It was pretty rough back in 2008, 2009, all the way through 2010. There were some unbelievable opportunities for businesses. Some of the biggest unicorns that we have seen in the most recent history came out of that recession, the darkest, deepest time that we've seen for a long time. We're about to head into one now, and we'll see one again in a few more years. They come. It's a cycle. It's a normal thing. But the thing is, for most businesses, is that you don't need to freak out about it. You just need to be prepared for it. You need to get ready for it. For most C-suite leaders, it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's being the most strategic. So during recessions or downtime, there's always a great opportunities. I mean, you go way back to 1907, the first more modern day, what we'd call recession, who was born out of those things. But, the car industries, General Motors came out of that in 1939. Hewlett Packard came out of it. You go further into the 50s, Hyatt Hotels, and then you go into the 70s, Microsoft, 1975, and during that recession. And then you go all the way to more modern, or Apple, 1980. You go into the most modern day times and you look at things like Airbnb, Groupon came out of that. Verbo. I can't remember thinking of all the different names that have come out of it that have seen Airbnb. I mean, all of these businesses came out of recessions during dark times. So the key is to be prepared for it, to do some different things. And recently I just did an episode, Never Waste a Good Crisis. How to thrive during the recession. And we're doing that on my show, All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. And I had 5 major economists on the show talking about what's the opportunities, what you need to do. And then I put together a recent ebook that I got a lot of contributors to give us, hundreds and hundreds of suggestions on things that you could do. So you just, write to me, go to C-Suite Network, and we'd be glad to get that out to you.
Yeah, one of the things you're mentioning, and I love this, the way you think about this and definitely navigating this, because it's an opportunity. And if you know how to navigate this properly, there's amazing opportunities out there. But what I always want to know also is really how to be aggressive in the right areas and not aggressive in the wrong areas. And making sure like you're obviously realistic in regards to what you can deploy and what you can obviously take advantage of in that opportunity, and really going double down on in the right timeline as well. We're seeing a lot of people sitting on dry powder, a lot of family offices, a lot of high net worth, ultra high net worth, a lot of corporations, companies. They were kind of anticipating this a little bit. So there's a lot of things that were happening. And I know that money is going to be deployed at some point, but I want to
It's going to be out there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that money is just going to be everywhere. There's going to be more money for businesses than you've ever seen. Now, you're not going to get it the traditional ways from banks because that they're just drying up. And look what we've seen with the bank culture in terms of the crisis around, interest rates and bond prices and so forth. But you ask about what to do about being aggressive, what to do. It's the same stuff you should be doing anyway. Okay, it's the same stuff you should be doing anyway. I mean, think about during COVID. We didn't cause it. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I didn't know how to sew a mask, but, I can be a business first responder. I can go out there and make sure that my people are employed. I can make sure that I'm fulfilling the needs of my customers and clients and members and everybody that I work with. I mean, that's what you should be doing. You should be doing anyway. So what do I want to think about right now? Well, I need to get rid of negative people. I don't need negative people when there's the bad mood going on. I don't need negative people when good times are going on. So, these are some common kinds of things that you want to double down. You should be looking at the whales in your business, the people that are really bringing in that 80%, that 20%. It's a Pareto rule. 80% of our business comes from 20%. I'll guarantee that's pretty much for every business that's out there. Okay, how can I diversify? You should be diversified. Don't put all your money into one bank. I think we saw that recently, right? So what's your banking structure for where you put your money so you can diversify it? I bet you'd be thinking about that now for those people that had it all in Silicon Valley Bank or had it all in Signature Bank or had it all in this bank or that bank. Those are the things you should have been doing ahead of time or before this happened. So just, use some common sense, practical kinds of things. And, a lot of times, especially with entrepreneurs, we don't think about that. We think we're above those things, and you never are. And you have to really start thinking about, adding more zeros to what you do, right? And, putting in the kind of proper processes and checks and balance in your business so you can be ready for the downtime. I mean, even like right now, 54%, and every business there is out there, 54% of your customers will do more business with you. Are you kidding me? I mean, for all of us, we should be going back to our customers, asking for more business. What can we be doing better? Circle the wagons around our client base that we have now and making sure that they're happy and they don't want to leave. And as I mentioned earlier, taking care of those whales. Double down everywhere you can. Somebody asked me yesterday, a consultant who's a major best-selling author and coach to a lot of chief revenue officers, and he's doing $10,000 a month with some particular client, and the client's coming down wanting to cut it for $7,500. And then this is one of his only big clients that he's kind of got. And he's saying, look, they're cheapening my price. I don't want to do business with them. I said, dude, it's the only client you got. What do you want to be so prideful? You want to get rid of them? What are you, stupid? Take the money and then work your way back up. Work it a different way. Go find the people that used to be there at that company. Go find where they went to and see if you can start doing work there. I mean, those are the things you have to do. And to me, that's just common sense, common sense.
Well, what I find interesting, like you were mentioning there, Jeffrey, is just like you said, you have to be realistic. You have to acknowledge what you have. Don't get that pride, and be humble a little bit, but acknowledge where you're at, but also getting aggressive in those opportunities. Now, I'm curious, like you mentioned, there's a lot of dry powder sitting on the sidelines. When you're talking to a lot of your C-suite, I mean, coming from the CEO to COO to CMO to, technology officer, investment officer, information officer, whatever that is on the C-suite side of things, what are you seeing in regards to, obviously during growth, people get fat. And what I mean by that is obviously access in regards to employment. We're getting too many people hired and it becomes really growth and we get too big. We're seeing that in the tech sector. A lot of people are slimming down. A lot of people are, being unemployed and removal. That's fine because now all of a sudden it becomes more efficient because now we need less people to do the same amount of work, if not more output. And I'm curious, are you seeing that at a macro and a micro level in regards to a lot of companies in your ecosystem with the C-suite where they're really kind of streamlining it, getting it thinner, and how has that been beneficial to, expand the runway, if you will?
Well, it's got good points and bad points in terms of how you're doing, but I don't think there's a business out there that's not going to use this as an excuse, and they should use this as an excuse. I mean, every time a crisis comes up, you want to take advantage of it as much as possible, no matter what it is. And so every single large company, you're already starting to see them do it, but now the smaller companies are starting to think like the large companies and say, why can't I do the same thing? They can move a little bit faster, fleet of foot. They should have been doing it anyway. So at a micro level, we're starting to see it. And so what we're starting to see more of is X as a service. right? And that is where we used to think we had to employ all these people. We used to have them all. And now we've learned this through COVID. COVID didn't cause it, but COVID accelerated. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years in terms of the speed of which we need to operate and the speed of which we need to think about our business. So now you can start to look and say, geez, do I really need all these employees? Do I really need it in this fashion or manner? I mean, look, I've got a building that I own that used to have IBM in it. Used to have, I say that because they said, we don't need a building anymore. We can go in to put all these people out. So now I've got an empty building, and I'm sitting there when I'm the only one going to the office when I am in the office, and nobody else is there either. So you start to think, do I really need this like I used to? So we think differently, but I would have guaranteed you 3 years ago, I said, there's no way we're not going to the office. There's no way we're not going to be together. There's no way I won't have employees, and now I can have contractors. And if I start to move to contractors, I can start to think, do I really need to offer all the benefits that I used to offer before? Because that was my mindset. So there's a lot of this thinking going on about, geez, how can I do this easier and quicker and faster and slimmer, right? Again, strategic decisions, because if you looked at your heart, you'd love to have everybody sitting around the water cooler and all that kind of stuff. So now you got to just do it a different way. And you do meetings in different ways, You start opening the meeting with what are some good things that you have to share about your comrades, today, or your coworkers. And what are good things that you saw from customer service or that we did today for customers or for clients. I mean, it's just a different way of approaching it. And I think you're starting to see a lot more of that a lot faster.
Well, that's what I find so unique in regards to the feedback loop, where you're having this data come in, and as things adjust, as the foundation adjusts, we've seen a lot of companies, definitely in the restaurant biz during COVID, we saw a lot of companies just pivot very quickly and very efficiently online, which was really beautiful. Now, some didn't make it fully because they were kind of behind the curve on that. And that's what I'm wondering also is, what are you seeing right now with your ecosystem? What are they adjusting? What are they adapting? What are they moving toward? Are they doubling down on M&A? Are they doubling down on more of marketing or R&D? What are you noticing the money or allocation accordingly, or are they just kind of
marketing? By and large, it's marketing. They're looking at different ways to reach the client because we don't have the touch points anymore. We don't have the interactions that we had. I mean, you did a great example of restaurants. They changed a great deal. They pivoted, right? They moved to foods that travel well. Who would have thought something like that? Okay, meaning I'm going to order food that goes from the restaurant to my home well. And so they started focusing on those kinds of foods. That changes the whole way we look at how we order, the way we order. They moved to things like family packs of food, right? In terms of more in bulk as opposed to less individual meals. So you had restaurants that would traditionally have the family come in. Now they're packaging it up and sending it home as opposed to just a meal or two before. And I thought that's very unique. When you even look at some of the restaurants now, look at the drive-ups that they're doing. All right, you can't even go into McDonald's and actually order from a real human being. You have to go to the kiosk, which is a pain in the rear end, if you ask me. But nonetheless, that's what you do. So you order it by the app and you drive up. I mean, Chick-fil-A has now got 2 lanes coming into their operation, and they actually put up canopies over the drive-up area so they can have workers help to pre-take the orders before they even get to the kiosk so that they can start to move the food along. I mean, to me, this is the kind of innovation that they're starting to think through. I mean, I know that at some point they're going to have 2 lanes on either side of a McDonald's with a different exit. Right? I mean, to be able to drive people, and it's just, very unique ways of being able to think about the business. And so I think what we start to do is that we just go like, hey, the way we did it and the speed of which we did it was a lot different pre-COVID, and it's making us think. Now, there's some downsides to that, Kristen. I think when you see in the C-suite is I think it's harder to scale. It's harder to scale some businesses in a disconnected model. And what I mean by that, by not being together, not being around each other, being able to move entire forces, because you don't even know what some of these folks are doing. I mean, there's going to be a lot of software that's going to come out to check on people whether they have 2 jobs at the same time, because there are people who are double dipping. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They're writing, now it's different than a side hack. A side hack's different. Side hack's something you do part-time, but there are people who are working full-time jobs and pulling full-time checks from multiple companies. That just doesn't seem fair, right? Unless you're going to disclose those kinds of things, especially if the companies are paying benefits and paying taxes and everything else. So there's a lot of different things you have to kind of, that are going to change as we go forward in terms of the way in which we structure a business.
Well, and you say adaptation and being flexible and being nimble in regards to when that feedback loop is telling you something different and that data is coming in, and you got to adjust and pivot to some macro thing that you can't really control, which is going to always happen, whether it's a recession, whether it's COVID, whether it's another, war, whatever it may be, something's always going to be a changing. And the leaders that are able to obviously be able to, be flexible with that. Jeffrey, though, the way you approach it is you're able to look at a situation and think almost like you mentioned common sense, right? You're able to see it in a holistic venue, and mainly because that comes with your experience and expertise being many years in it. What has helped you being able to look at a situation or data and be able to make that right decision pretty quickly with the limited data that you do have?
The experience, I've bought and sold over 250 companies in my career, over 25 billion transaction, former Fortune 100 officer managing billions of dollars of marketing and advertising budgets, the variety of things that I've done, over a time period. And of course, quite frankly, interviewing hundreds, if not, well, quite frankly, thousands and thousands of executives on stage or, on my shows. The one constant, by the way, I was, as you were talking, that I see all the time, it's always about talent. Talent is the biggest thing that consumes most executive leaders and what they do and how they do it. And that is, the ups and downs of handling and working with employees and sometimes customers. I used to say it's a lot of fun to be in business if it weren't for customers and employees, but just as a joke. But I think it's like so many people like to, they'll call me and they'll talk to me whether they're building a brand of themselves, which if you look at me, I'm a brand, and in terms of Hayzlett and what I do, and television show, podcast show, 5 best-selling books, keynote speaking, this, consulting, board work, serving on 14 corporate boards, 4 of them public, all these kinds of things. There's a business just around me. And then there's this C-suite business, and then there's all these other businesses that I'm an investor in or a part of or outright own. And so, what I found through all that process is that, there's a lot of the same thing. So when people come to me and say, oh, I'm this, yeah, you don't have to fill me in, I get it, or they're doing this type of business, there's some commonalities between those things that are the same, always. And so, yeah, you can take a look at it pretty quick and smell it. It's just no different than when I've been in front of experienced CEOs and I'm pitching something or I'm reporting at a Fortune 100 level, and I got this nice PowerPoint presentation and I'm working my way through it, and he or she turns to page 26 and says, "Let me ask you about this." They just know. And it's, it's almost, I've been in front of huge investors. I used to be partners with Sheldon Adelson at the Venetian Hotel, one of the richest men in the world, before he passed. And, that son of a, whatever, he'd open up a presentation and find a misspelled word on page 35 and ask you the one frickin' question, turn to the one point in that presentation, which was your weakest point, and then ask you the question. I mean, that's just the experience that people have over time.
Well, yeah, you mentioned quite a few, obviously you got many, many years experience in this. And if you could, I want to dive into a little bit of your failures a little bit, because we all know we learn the best from our failures. But Jeffrey, I know many individuals, we can always look at our life and say that's what our whole life is almost, and then being able to get some big wins, right? And that has kind of, evolved into some really amazing things for yourself. But Jeffrey, if you could find maybe one or two, and think about that younger Jeffrey that was just kind of navigating this, didn't know exactly what you were doing. Were there one or two pivotal moments in your life or, experiences or learning experiences that were really like that was the turning point for you and the way you thought about things and the way maybe you even just presented yourself, or maybe certain unconscious beliefs that you had to destroy to create the Jeffrey Hayzlett that we see now?
Yeah, I laugh because, usually in an interview they say, well, what was your biggest failure? And I always answer, well, I don't know, I haven't done it yet. which meaning there's, there are failures. There's lots of them. It is the key isn't to fail fast. The key is to win fast. You're going to have failures. Let's be clear. You're going to continually fail every day. And when you say my younger life, hell, what about the one I did yesterday or the day before that? I mean, we're going to fail in everything we do. And so you just have to understand that. But again, my philosophy isn't, because right now there's a lot of people who are talking about fail fast, fail fast, fail fast. No, win fast. I mean, because you're going to fail. So, a lot of times I forget about them because that was just part of the process you move to get to the win. It's like striking out. Well, it's the base hits I remember, the home runs I hit that I want to hit, By the way, better to hit base hits than home runs by a long shot. It'll just move you along faster. But, yeah, let me give you one example. I started a pheasant farm years ago. Here I am in South Dakota. It's the state bird of South Dakota. I love pheasants. I love to hunt pheasants. I love to, shoot them. I love to eat them. And so I just thought there was a market for pheasants. I tried to create a market and, build a ranch for pheasants. And I tried to build a market until I finally realized there wasn't one. I lost my ass. Okay. Big time, lost my ass. It was the worst thing in the world. Pheasants are the stupidest birds in the world. I'm still not over it, right? And this was, 40 years ago. I've done that. I've done things the first 3 days of the job on Eastman Kodak. Did something really stupid where, I took somebody's word for something and about what they did and how they did it. We cut a commercial about it, and it used some fairly vulgar language. And then I got called into the CEO's office on the 3rd day I was on the job, and I, almost going to throw up because I think I'm going to get fired, those are the things you learn. I remember he said, it was a word that I said, well, the women were okay with it. He goes, yeah, but we're the Hispanics. I went, uh-oh. I didn't run the word by Hispanic. So, so these are the things you learn. And you just don't do that again, because that's going to hurt. And so you just move on and understand it. The most important thing I think it's important for you is you mentioned this, your beliefs, your values, and that you need to really operate in them. And when you're operating outside of those values, that's usually when it really hurts you, when you've made a mistake. And, I just finished up one of those right now with an organization that I've been consulting with and doing, and they just don't fit my values. And you know what? I'm still mad at myself, but I took the money, and I shouldn't have done that. And so as you realize that, you then start to extricate yourself from those kinds of things and saying, this is just not me. And it's not you, it's not me, it's the situation, and this doesn't fit well. And so you just have to feel good about that. So I think being clear about your own personal conditions of satisfaction is probably the best thing you could possibly do as a person, human being, and certainly as a business executive, in terms of knowing what those personal conditions of satisfaction are and what drives you and what makes you who you are. And then inside of that becomes the values that you're grounded in, as an individual, as a professional, as a human. And for me, I try to drive, people above profits wherever possible, but, making money is how we keep score. So, that's got to be at the forefront. My personal conditions of satisfaction is I want to build wealth for me and my family. I didn't grow up very rich when I was growing up. I want my family and my children and my grandchildren to have a better life than I do. I think they are, and I think they will. So that's important for me. So building wealth. The next is I want to learn new things. I like to learn. I enjoy learning and that lifelong pursuit of learning and how we do things and being surprised by things. And last but not least, I want to have fun. And if I can't have all 3 of those things, I really don't want to do it. And I'm at a point in my life where it's too much of a pain in the ass. I'm too grumpy. I'm too old. I don't need to do it. And so I'm not. And, people will come to me a lot of times, Christian, and say, oh, Jeff, you've got to do this program. You got to put your stuff out there as a course. And like, no, I don't want to do that. And I don't have to. So there you go. So you just need to know what's in it for you the way you want to do it.
I'm so glad we went down this way. I'm so glad we're talking a little bit about values. We don't talk about this. How has your values, or first of all, what was the thing that started allowing you to become aware of, okay, I need to create values to filter these decisions. And then secondly, how has your values evolved during your life? Maybe when you were single to when you're married to now we're obviously family man and obviously maybe even corporate as well, from corporate values to family values, et cetera. How has that evolved? And at what point did you start realizing you need a set of values?
Well, I think you realize early on in life your values come from the socialization of your family and the way in which you grow up. And I think our parents help us a great deal, and those people who are around us that influence us. Now, my father was in the military, so he was gone a great deal, spent years abroad and on tours of duty and was gone. And then my parents divorced, when I was young, when I was like 14. And so yeah, so pretty soon I had to have some other people in my life that, walked into my life in different ways, like a Harold Jones, who was a former Marine gunnery sergeant in Vietnam, who became my baseball coach, and and he took care of me, became kind of my surrogate father, and then got me into a hunting club with a bunch of men, Big John's Hunting Club, and Big John, by the way, was a former Sherman tank gunner during World War II, and I used to sit around and listen to these unbelievable stories. I was watching Band of Brothers the other day, thinking of him, just the other day, what that was like, and he told me how they would run over car. I mean, it was amazing. It was just some of the stories these guys had. Or, to meet a Mr. Smith, a friend of my father's, gentleman who was one of the first troops to walk into Nagasaki after it was bombed, and to him tell me those stories and things like that. So that you get all these people, John Timmer, who stood for principles when he ran for office in South Dakota. Michael Connor taught me how to read a first cash register and do a Z out and run a business, and I bought his printing business. I mean, so, that's where I started to learn these different things that I had as part of it. And as you get older, you learn that you should have stood in your values a lot sooner in life. All right, that sometimes we cut the corners, or we think that's the way it should be. We need to look like a successful, so we need a Mercedes. We need these things. We don't need any of that crap. What we need is to be really grounded in who we are and what we do. And I sure would have liked to have more of that back when I was 16, 17, 18. I had a lot of it, by the way, more than most people do, because I've always been like that, standing for the little guy, doing for certain things, certain ways. This is the way it should be done, those kind of things. And it's not easy. There's a line in The Pretty Woman. It's easier to believe the bad things, if you remember that. She says that in Julia Roberts. And so it's easier, to go the bad way than it is the good way. And so I wish we'd have more reinforcement of that. We're starting to see that more, I think, in life. We started a group called the Hero Club. We actually bought the club, and it's a group for value-based CEOs and people who put, it's for CEOs and leaders of businesses who put people above profit. And we find that those businesses that have values, that are based and grounded in values, they gross more than their competitor. They net more than their competitor. They have employees who are happier. They have customers who are more loyal. They have vendors who want to do business with them. And when they walk through the community, everybody points at them and says, there goes, a dog soldier. There goes a hero. There goes a leader. And that's, I think, what you get when you're based in values.
I'm so glad we went down this, because I remember when I was running my business, I had a salesperson. He was one of my best salespeople, and I had to actually fire him because he was doing things unethical and it wasn't according to the company's values. And it was so tough. It was honestly, I have to tell you, Jeffrey, it was one of the toughest decisions, because
he was a good salesman. He was a good salesperson.
A lot of ass money. And I had to, so if you could look at and you just mentioned this just a second ago about where you took the money, but then you're like, wait a minute, they didn't align, but now you're stuck in this. But you learn and you're analyzing that situation, and then obviously preventing yourself from doing that in the future. And I love what you mentioned, where you become so intentional on your values that they become ingrained with who you are, so that you don't keep falling into those situations. And that's where sometimes, economics and these things don't align. And if you could look at your life where you had to stick with your values over doing a business partnership that could have brought in a lot of money, like you mentioned, people over profits, or values over profits sometimes. And that's why I think the intentionality that you bring. Could you give us an example of that, of a time or numerous times where it was like, hey, you prioritize values over the revenue or this over here?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that with jobs. I can remember setting in a meeting where we were cutting people's jobs at a major corporation, and at the end of it, we're changing people's lives, we're ruining people's lives. Now, not that we were; it was the situation that we were in, and and then at the end of it, the CEO walks over and said, "Here's your bonus check for doing that." I said, "What do you mean bonus check? You take that check and you know what you can do with it. We're not taking that check. No one's getting a bonus check. We just laid off thousands of people, and you want to give us a bonus. If you do that, I can't wait to go to the Wall Street Journal and talk about this, because we just ruin people's lives. And we should not benefit because we saved the company that kind of money. What we should do is put that money back in. And what jobs can we save? What people can we do? What more can we do to invest in the business to get us to a point where we don't have to do this again? So I will tell you that was I don't want to mention the company and who it was, but that happened. And we're talking about millions of dollars that could have been in my pocket or the pockets of other executives as well. And I just said, there's no way we're doing that. And if you do this, this goes against every principle that we have in this business. And, and that's when I realized that, look, there's a better way of doing things sometimes than just the almighty dollar or just the bottom line. And you take yours, and where's the golden parachutes? I mean, to think about, I'm all for free enterprise. I am the biggest advocate for free enterprise. Grew up this way, believe in it. I'm a capitalist, make money everywhere. I'm the kind of person that I'm a workaholic. I go to workaholic retreat to kind of get better, and I'm figuring out how much money they're making from the frickin' retreat. So that's how my mind works all the time. But there's a price that you got to pay for all that stuff, and a way in which you have to put forward that says, no, we're going to do things for the right reasons, and more people should spend more time doing that. I give a good example. I mean, I'm very upset and very vocal about a business like a bank. Let's say a bank goes down and people could lose lots of money, millions of dollars, and then they have to get bailed out, and then some of the executives got a huge bonus. No way. No way. I don't know about you, Chris, but when my business isn't going well and I got to make payroll, I'm the first salary I don't pay, right? I'm the first thing we're the first thing. My wife's sitting right here behind me. We've done this numerous times for businesses because that's just the way it operates. You have good times and you have bad times. And gosh forbid, that other people would think the same way. Wouldn't it be a better world? It'd be a lot better business. I'd much rather do business with people like that, because then I know I can trust them. I'm going to get paid eventually, right? Or, what they're telling me straight up, as opposed to I'm just another vendor. I got somebody right now owes me money for a couple of years, and they just don't want to pay it. Like, you sleazeball, If you could pay me, I could pay all my bills.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you said here, and I always look at the evolution of a business as it grows, right? When it's smaller, sub $1 million, you've got a smaller team, and a lot of times you can, really have that DNA or the values of that company and the culture very, very synergistic. But as it evolves into a larger corporation, maybe 100 million plus, et cetera, now you're talking, you got to integrate that into the culture and really make sure that reigns from the top down. And I'm curious, when you're working with a lot of your C-suite, and you're talking billion-dollar companies to sub $1 million, so all across the line, which is really nice. How do you see them really integrate what you're talking about, the values, and making sure that that's integrated into the DNA and the culture throughout the whole organization, whether it's a sub $1 million to $100 million, $1 billion valuated company?
Yeah, well, basically, let's talk about entrepreneurs first. So entrepreneurs they have a certain phase of growth that they have. They start off as a one-person band, one-man band, so please don't write me letters, or one-woman band if you want. And so they start off that way. And then the next phase is they add devout followers. And they like, hey, can you do a checkbook? Okay, you're the head of finance. Okay, can you do this? You're in charge of sales. That's what they do. And then they get to a point in a phase of evolution where they've got to add skilled practitioners. Now this is where it becomes very difficult, right? Because now they have to start to imprint the new people as to what they're really about, right? And then, as you say, as they go to bigger in terms of starting adding a lot more zeros to whatever the numbers are, that's when it really gets out of control. And so you have to start to think about what are the core pieces that drive us, our mission, our vision, right, that we have. But with that, you have to have a set of values. You have to say that these are the company values. These are what we cherish the most. And those have to be at the forefront of what we want to do, or you'll never get to the next level, because your culture is whatever you make it. When I was at Kodak, you're Kodak, I'm Kodak, she's Kodak, and 145,000 other people are Kodak. And together that makes up the culture. Now, if you think that you can impact that and move that by a great amount, you're nuts. Okay? But you can impact it by getting to core values. And we're looking for people with these kinds of things that make up the DNA that we want. And I want to imprint that DNA with our mission, our vision. And so if you can do that, you can start to impact the culture, but the culture takes a long time. So the next piece that you really got to focus on, more than I think anything else, is mood. Is what's the mood of the company? Because you can go into a company, Christian, and you can sense its mood. You can sense its cadence. You can sense the energy of the business by just watching them, talking to them on the phone, watching their ads, doing all of those kinds of things. And so I think mood is the biggest impact that impacts a lot of business. I mean, how many times have you been into a really great restaurant, but they're all snotty? And the mood is they're just stuck up, and you're just like, I don't want to go back. How many times have you been to a really shitty restaurant, quite frankly, but where the food's not that great, but the people are so much fun and the attitude, and so you want to go back. And so that's the impact I think most of us have to focus on. And as leaders, we've got to first say, hey, what is our core values that we have with our mission and vision, so I can imprint everybody around that, hire to the values and strengthen the values and continue to operate with values. I can remember way back in the 90s where I was at a company called Color Bus, a raster image processing company. I was president and head of sales and marketing at that company. And it was a software and technology company. And we were doing a company-wide meeting with a couple hundred employees, and someone's in the shipping and the shipping operation said, "Do I have the ability to shut down the shipping line if I see something that's not right?" That was a heck of a question by an hourly employee to be able to ask that. And the CEO said, "Absolutely, you do." He goes, "But we'll lose revenue if we don't get the products out." He says, "Yeah, but you'll save us money in the long time, and it's core to who we are about shipping the product." And I'll never forget that he was willing to say, "Yes, you can do that." And I thought, yeah, of course you should do it, because we don't want to ship out shitty products, because we'll get shitty returns and have a shitty reputation and have shitty profits and everything else that relates to that, right?
Well, you mentioned, and I want to footstep on this. We talk about short-term versus long-term thinking, and that was a really good example of how. And I see a lot of public companies when they go public, you're fighting against customers' long-term thinking versus and the vision of where the company's going to investors. And sometimes those things are not aligned sometimes, because they look at quarterly reports and we're not looking at, okay, hey, what do we want to accomplish within the next 3 years, 5 years, 7-year vision? And so there's this misalignment sometimes. And what I'm curious on is, just like you mentioned, where, hey, you have these values, you integrate that into the DNA, the mood of the company, like you mentioned, just that criteria, that baseline. You hire for talent acquisition, but it's mainly based on values. Also, the skills can always be taught, and obviously, expedite and scale that in talent acquisition. But then really saying, hey, you know what, we've got this long-term goal. And like you mentioned, hey, we may lose $100 million right now short term, but we're going to solve and we're going to save almost $1 billion loss. And we see a lot of, definitely in the car business, it's very well known for a lot of recalls. And you think about how much money that really just eats up and the cost and so forth. So we see that in a lot of different recalls in different industries. I'm just saying car business specifically because it's well known for it. But what other good examples do you see in regards to the C-suite where you're seeing that, where that becomes also the DNA of the culture itself, where it's like, hey, short-term versus long-term, and how that has helped companies, definitely in a recession or definitely in, booms and bust cycles?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book called The Hero Factor and what makes, great companies heroes, in terms of that. And there's different types there's a grid that's laid out in terms of operational excellence and bottom line, and then those that are ass hats and those that are wannabes, and then those that are real living in their values. And you always want to be in that upper quadrant because that is really where the magic happens. But you have businesses over here that are great businesses, and they just don't have any values. They don't have the values that, are what I would call more humanistic values of being real humans. I mean, let's look at Amazon. Amazon's a monster. There's a company that lost millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I was wondering if they were ever going to make money. They lost billions of dollars at one point that they were down, but their operational excellence is unbelievable. They just have no values. Their values are predatory. If you think about it, if you Google's another example of that. My opinion, great operational values, but how about let's go to GE, let's go to Walmart. All of those companies are operational excellence out the what, and yet they don't have the values that you would want to instill in your kids to raise and to be good human beings, right? Jeff Bezos, all power to him, right? But he's not doing the things that need to happen in local communities, doesn't care. That's just not who they are. They don't really care about their core customers. God, I would say this on TV or whatever, that I don't want them to strike me down, but I'm still going to use their company. I'm still going to use their products. But understand that if I were competing with them in some category, they'd crush me. They're predatory. They crush me, and they find the things that work inside the company, and then they start selling that product. It becomes an Amazon product as soon as they figure out the algorithms and everything else. And so you just need to understand, that's just the way some businesses operate, and you just need to understand where you want to fit in that and how you want to be. And if you can be that kind of business if you want to be, but you don't have to be because you can.
Well, do you feel like we have evolved a little bit away from that, from the Vanderbilts, from the
No,
from
no.
Bezos, and no? Do you feel like it's always a cutthroat, and depending upon how
Yeah,
you?
there's always been, it's human nature of greed is something that's core to one of the deadly sins. What is it? The 7 deadly sins. And so, it's going to always be there. Just like, I don't want to compare it to murder and theft and everything else. We got people who do those kinds of things, people who sin. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect because, gosh, no, I've made a few extra pennies on the margin or dollars on the margin. I've done some of those things too, but I try to operate in values where I win and you win. Okay, that's one of my core values in terms of what I try to do. And so, because how much do you really need? What do you need to do? Do I need to take advantage of it in order to feel better about myself? Not really. So there's just different ways to go about it. And, we can all approach that. And that's what makes this a great country and makes it a wonderful world, is that you can do it the way you want to do it and how you want to do it, to whom you want to do it, or with whom you want to do it. And so, I think those are the kind of things you need to think about and just decide. I wrote my first book was called The Mirror Test. And it was basically about the things you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself. And that's a pretty good, thing, because the person that's responsible for you is looking back at you in the mirror every day. And I prefer to look in the mirror to be able to at least answer myself and look at myself and put up with myself. But by the way, let's be clear. I mean, I've been married for 42 years. I wouldn't be married to me. She's a saint. And so, certain things, don't think that, I'm being perfect in any way, shape, or form. I get grumpy. I yell at my team. I got to call them back the next day or an hour later and say, hey, I'm sorry. I was having a bad day, or I'm having a bad moment. But I took it out on you. But that's the give and take. If you're living inside your values and being authentic in who you are, you should be able to handle. And everybody around you should be able to handle it.
Well, Jeffrey, I appreciate your humility and your authenticity. And even though you may not always live up to the values, there is an expectation, and you do your best. And I appreciate your humility in regards to how you approach it. And I'm glad we went down to the value side of things and how not only integrate it into your own family, what you do intentionally, but also integrate it into the business and how that is the DNA and the culture and how important that is, definitely for hiring talent and scaling.
Yeah, It's hard. Sorry to interrupt. It's hard. You put the quarter in, you get to go for the full ride, brother. So that's the way it works with me. But it's hard to separate it. I don't know how you could separate it between you and the business. In most of our business, especially going forward, you have to be a thought leader in what you do and how you do it. You've got to sell yourself, sell the business, sell you. And so much of who we are is inside. If you're giving to the business, you're giving your heart and soul. I mean, it's all in for me wherever I go. And like this thing I'm, moving myself out, I couldn't give all in. I tried to change it. I wanted to change it, and then I realized you can't change it. You can't change it. And I should have been asking myself the same questions, sometimes. And I let the money overshadow the real reasons why I should have been there. And so, and then the guy, like, I don't need this. Plus I wasn't getting paid for a while there as well. So that helped accelerate those things too. But, if you're, like I made this comment about the brand of you, in essence, you have to sell the business. And one of the things we have to realize in the way that social media has played out for us today, it's made us more open as a brand of understanding that a brand is nothing but a promise delivered. So that promise is out there for everybody now. And so as a leader of a business, I mean, you're going to have to use content to drive your community, and community then leads to commerce. Those are going to be critical for you. And so you have to learn to be able to, put it out there all the time and share about that and be who you are. And that's why I say sell you, sell the business, sell you. So be the brand of you. I mean, even if you're a dry cleaner in St. Louis, you have to become the doctor of spots, because the advertising, the marketing, the things that worked before didn't work before. You have to be seen as the expert. Like, if you do this, you can get this out so that people can find you via content. Then that leads to growing your community, which then gives you more commerce.
Yeah, the whole marketing structure has drastically changed, and obviously we'll have to have you on again and talk much about that, because I do know you're an expert at that, and I wanted to dive into it, but sadly we don't have enough time with you, Jeffrey, and I appreciate you being on here, man, and talking.
I'll come back. I'll come back.
Yes, 100%. Love that idea. But one of the biggest things, I really appreciate you just talking about your values, talking about the what you've gone through, the failures, but experiences and expertise that you brought in today. Jeffrey, for those that want to reach out to you, I know you're the founder and chairman of the C-Suite Network. You have a huge ecosystem, a ton of content out there. I know they can reach out to you on a lot of different platforms. How do they reach out to you, Jeffrey?
Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Find my Jeffrey Hayzlett, Hayzlett, at c-suite network.com. You can reach to me there. But, find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'll respond back. I always respond back to everybody, because I know there's always a pony out there somewhere. So, and everybody should be accessible. So I always try to do that. If you reach out to me, I'll guarantee I'll get back to you.
Awesome, guys. Those links are in the description. I'll put all of his content out there, all of the platforms, social media platforms, the website, LinkedIn as well, so you can reach out to him. He's got tons of content, incredible podcast as well. I would highly recommend listening to that one. Jeffrey, I really appreciate you being on here again, just talking, and we're going to have you on again, like we mentioned. Guys, that is the chairman and founder of C-Suite Network, the one and only Jeffrey Hayzlett. Guys, that's Journey with Christian Dievas podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.